What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Reactive Attachments, the podcast. And you know me, Taylor, the host that loves to piss people off with unpopular opinions. So I just want to get straight into some of that, actually. I know that these podcasts and the videos and the different things, the content, whatever, it isn't like the most wonderful, like doesn't give you butterflies. It's not rainbows and beautiful fairy tale endings, because those things aren't really the facts. Like, I hate to tell you guys the truth, because I don't want these things that I'm discussing to be facts. Like, I don't want this to be the way it is. I don't feel happy about it. Like, I don't feel like it is cool to have this like information, and it's like this thing that's like, ooh, I have like this secret sauce that like nobody else knows. Like, I don't have joy in my heart because these things are true and I'm enlightening the masses. That's not how it feels. And when I started as like my journey in this world many years ago, before I even started college, like when I was deciding what I was going to do, I used to say things like, I want to fight for us. There's nobody fighting for us. The people that step up to the plate to take care of these kids that are abandoned and that, are just kind of left and neglected and blah, blah, blah. Like, what about us? As soon as the parent, gets their life together, finishes their case plan, even if it's 2 or 5 years later, like, they have a chance to be back in this child's life. And I've raised this child, and like, what about us? What about us? What about us? That was my very naive thoughts at age 20, 21, like whatever. I really felt like I wanted to enter social services and fight for the quote unquote us, and I'm glad I changed my career path and I didn't do that, because that was never the right choice. First off, that was never the right choice. Second of all, was it, it was a very selfish driving. It was driven by very selfish emotions. Like, I wanted to have a, chance at keeping this picture perfect idea that I had in my mind. And I had been raising this kid as her mom, and I told the world that she was my child. And we didn't really discuss the facts. Like, she obviously was too young, but I didn't discuss the facts with other people, co-workers or whatever. My family had their opinions, and that was the source of contention. But, I wanted it to be as close to real as possible, and I felt like it was. And I would get very offended when anyone would challenge that. I didn't like people to challenge what I felt like was my reality. I didn't like people to challenge what my intentions were, or, I didn't even really want to talk about it. Like, I didn't even want it to come up in a general conversation that this child that I had been raising as my own wasn't mine biologically. Like, we look so much alike that fortunately that never was an issue. She has dark hair and blue eyes, tan skin. I have dark hair, blue eyes, tan skin. Like, people never, and when they do find out that she's not mine biologically, oftentimes they're shocked, because it's just not even, a question. So I wanted to live in that place, like, for a really long time. I knew about reactive attachment disorder. I knew that it was part of our existence. I knew that I experienced a lot of rejection because of it, but I just thought, like everyone else thinks, that like in due time that will not be a focus. It wouldn't be even a condition that we had to deal with anymore. I think I believed wholeheartedly that I could love her through that, and that love would be enough for that. And then there's like more trauma occurring that I'm not even aware of, really, because her dad is becoming, deeper. He's falling deeper into his addiction at this time, and he's less and less involved or whatever. And it's just a really complex, messy attachment story, like everybody else. And I'm really trying to make this story, as happy, give it a the happiest ending possible. Like, I really believe that I had it all figured out, and I really believe that if anything, like, just like everybody else believes, like, I'm not a stranger to the system of thought, like, that most people have. They don't want to hear these negative things. They feel like they are, it's separate from their experience, and that, you just fucked it up. If you can't get to that point where this child is loved just as much as a biological child, that's on you. That's not, that's not for everybody, that everybody doesn't have to deal with the traumas of attachment in their storyline. And, they feel like if you can't make it work and figure it out, and you can't have the same kind of relationship with this child that, you would have with the biological child, then that's your fault, and that the rest of it's kind of bullshit, or it's an excuse. But that isn't true, and I just want people to understand, like, this wasn't always my position. This belief that biological parents need as many opportunities as possible to reunify, that infertility is not a reason to adopt or to foster to adopt. These types of feelings and thoughts and, like, all of that stuff, it didn't come to me in a time or in a moment of trying to be controversial or combative or oppositional and adversarial to the vast majority of the population. Like, that's not what happened. What happened is, I've been doing this for so long. Like, I've been involved in this life for so long that I've been exposed to different scenarios and different, facts. And I started looking at the things that made the most sense in my life. Like, in my own experience, I don't have biological children, right, that I'm attached to. So I can't really speak to that. And I never could. I could say it's the same, but I didn't really know if it was the same. Like, let's be honest, how the hell would I know? I didn't know. I desperately wanted it to be the same, but I didn't have biological children. I don't have them now. But what I do have is a biological mother who I am extremely, she passed away, but, like, I was extremely attached to, and she was a whole mess. Okay? Like, that's the facts. The truth is, she had a drug and alcohol problem my entire life. Her financial situation, her motivation and drive to maintain an income for the family was, strongly impacted by mental health problems as well as addiction. Like, there were extremely obvious similarities in the story of who I was as a child and who my mom was, to all of these stories. And I was, removed from the home. I was placed in kinship care multiple times. Like, my mom had multiple case plans that she had to complete. Like, I moved out of the house and started taking care of someone else's kid when I was, like, not even 18 yet. Like, I dropped out of high school. I had to get my GED, and then, like, I did eventually go to college and get a degree. It was, like, a really complex situation, the family dynamics, and I myself have battled a lot of things over the years as a child of my mom's, like, of who my mom is. But also, like, now that my mom has passed away, I'm 32 years old, getting closer to being 33. I have, I can look at this and say, well, the truth is, it didn't matter. I was bribed with all the things that I wanted. Like, I remember when I wanted a pager, for example, and I wanted, like, a piercing so bad, like my belly button or my nose or something. I don't know. I think I was 12 or 13. Probably 12, actually. My mom was, like, in one of the biggest crises of her life, of my life, and I had been living with my grandparents, and my aunt got involved, and she's beyond qualified to take care of children, as, like, that's what her job. I'm not gonna, like, give up all her credentials, but just put it this way, like, she is an attorney that represents children and their best interests, in the county that she lives in, and she has for over 20 years. So she's definitely qualified to decide and to step in and take care of a child that is obviously, going through some neglect or, abandonment type. I wasn't abandoned, but like neglect for drug related issues and whatever else. And she really wanted to take me on, and she was like, look, you want a pager, like we'll get you a pager. You want to get a piercing, like we'll work on like, how can you earn that, and when would it be appropriate to get like a nose piercing or something, like, I mean, all the things, like she said all the things. And she has a beautiful home that she built herself, and she has, like, financially she had a lot to offer in private school, and I got to go and do certain things that, like camps and different, things that I was interested in. She could fund all of those things, and I was miserable. I was absolutely miserable. I'm sure I was problematic. I mean, I know I was problematic for her, and I couldn't understand, and it felt really like unfair, and it felt really like almost like abusive to me that people wanted to separate me from my mom, and I didn't know what was going on with her, and they weren't telling me like what her progress was in rehab, or if she was even in rehab, or like where she was, what was she doing, how was she. I couldn't really talk to her. I was like, she had to do these things, and I didn't give a shit about the things that she was supposed to have to do. And anytime the opportunity like came up in an argument or otherwise about me just going back to my mom, like wherever the hell she was and whatever she was doing, I was like, cool, let's go, send me right now, please. And eventually she did. Like eventually she was like, okay, I'm done. Like this isn't, and I'm not, like, I wasn't insanely troubled and like problematic. I was more consistently and this is of course in my perspective, but like I was unwaveringly uninterested in like long term. Initially I was like, yes, I need a break, blah blah blah. I was like really validating, and everybody wanted to hear what I had to say about my assessment of things, and that felt validating. Like words of affirmation is my love language, and people like patting me on the back and giving me praise, like that gets me going. So when I like what I think I brought to the chaos was that I just wouldn't really assimilate. I wouldn't integrate into a new life, and my aunt doesn't have any children. She's a career person. She's very successful in a very, she has a very high level job. Like she has a doctorate degree. Like she's very much the expert in her field, etc. So like she focused on having a career, and my mom was just kind of all over the place. And I'm sure I know my family like felt like they were always cleaning up after her. My family financially had to take care of my needs most of the time, like from my grandparents, or even my aunt would pay for things or whatever. So my whole story is very similar to the children that I talk about, except for when I'm talking about children that don't have secure attachment, they are seeking the same kinds of things, but they just have more problematic behaviors. Like my drive was always to go home. It was always to go home. And like I would, try to kill myself, or like I say it, like I'm kind of rolling my eyes as I say it, because obviously like my efforts were mostly to get attention, I think, or to change the circumstances. I don't think I ever really wanted to die. I don't really remember, to be honest, but I know that I was definitely acting out because I didn't want to be where I was, which checked all the boxes, and it was the most perfect of situations, but I couldn't assimilate, and I wasn't integrating into this. I had no interest in like, I didn't want to live my life there. I wanted to live my life in whatever, chaos and madness my mom existed in, and that was the end of it. And like, I just couldn't let it go. So, now I've talked about all the crazy things with my mom, like the bad side, I guess. The positive side is that my mom is a totally different, extremely evolved human. Like the way that she loved, the way that she listened, the way that she thought about the world. She's very sensitive, very emotional, very empathic. She was a person with lots of feelings, and she got her feelings hurt really easily, which I think led her to, of course, drugs and alcohol, whatever. But she definitely showed love to me in even in her worst moments, when she was out of her mind and she would say things that were totally like off the wall. But like who my mom was and how she like loved people in this world, and how I felt loved by her and how connected I was to her. It was toxic probably from the outside, I'm sure, because it didn't matter where she was at and getting help. Like I wanted, whether she was actively seeking help and getting it and getting better, or if she was actively in her addictions and didn't give a shit and wasn't seeking help, like I didn't care at all. I would lie for her. I would cover up for her. I would battle her physically, fight her for like take pills and flush them down the toilet or whatever, whatever it was. I would do whatever, and I would lie and say that things were great, and I would, manipulate people around me, and it was toxic, I'm sure. Like, not I'm sure, I know. Like, I know it was toxic. But it didn't matter at all, because for me, my relationship with my mom, and knowing where she was, knowing that she was okay, knowing that she wasn't, like, about to die somewhere from an overdose or, a suicide attempt or whatever, it was more important to me than, like, having a normal life. I didn't care. I didn't care what it looked like. I just wanted to be involved. And then when I got older, when I was an adult, I did care. And I was pissed. And I was like, okay, like, let's be honest with each other. Like, let's have some boundaries and, like, be real. I don't have any other adults that are, like, making these choices for me anymore. So you can be honest with me. We can have boundaries. And, like, if she had lied to me or something, I would be, irate. And then we would have, if she broke my boundaries, like, we would have these big blow-ups. I mean, it was always messy in that way. But even in its messiness, it was fueled by a desire and a fear. A desire for me to know that she was safe. And then a fear that she wasn't safe, or that things were going to be out of my control, or like, that I wouldn't be able to, restrain her, or that I wouldn't find her, that I wouldn't, whatever. Like, I was terrified of losing her, and I didn't even recognize it as that probably for a long time, because I remember even saying things like, I've accepted that I'm going to lose my mom young. Like, look at her. Like, sometimes I would feel like, okay, I mean, look at her. She's a shell of herself. She's basically already dead. I would say things like that. And I would feel in my heart like I had accepted that my mom's drug abuse would take her from me, and that I had already dealt with that. I mean, I don't know why the hell I thought I had already dealt with that. That's crazy. But, in my mind, like how I am now, I always think I'm the smartest person in the room and I know everything. Like, I really believed that I had, accepted the facts of my mom's demise, and, when things got better and they stayed on a steady, what I believe to be a steady, a steady pattern of improvement for a long time. And that doesn't mean things were perfect. I just mean that they were progressively always a little bit better than they used to be, So I kind of had let go of some of that, and I was aging and maturing, and I had moved across the country, and we were, in a whole different season of life when she unexpectedly passed away. And so as a person who has been through, as a parent, as a caregiver for a child with reactive attachment disorder, and then also as a child who was securely, and I mean that in the most, I felt like my mom wasn't doing all the right things, but I was definitely attached to her. It was a secure attachment for a long time, secure and normal, I guess, for the most part, until it wasn't. And I stayed extremely attached to her. Even when I felt like I was giving us space, or I would take a break and like we wouldn't be on speaking terms for a couple weeks or something, I always felt like, you know, our communication was very clear. Our understanding of each other's boundaries or whatever, once I became an adult, it was, you know, very simple. And if it didn't work out, like if she pushed a boundary, then I would cut off contact. Like, but I was always like intuitively, I was attached to her my whole life. Like, I mean, there's no doubt about it. Like she, you know, her bad habits, her bad behaviors or whatever that were, whether they're drug addiction, the foundation of them were, you know, because of her addiction, or because she had some, you know, like immature emotional patterns herself from being on drugs for so long or whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, I always felt extremely connected to her. I felt like I can't put into words what attachment feels like. And I ask people to explain to me what loving a biological child feels like, and most people don't really have a good way of explaining it. They just they can't really, they try, they start out with an effort, but they can't really exactly put those feelings into words. And I can't exactly put the connection that I had to my mom into words. I can just tell you that, like, I knew before verbal confirmation, like I would know exactly what was going on with her. I could tell what kind of drug she was on, or about to be on, before she even took it. Like, my mom's biggest drug addictions or whatever, her substance abuse lived mostly in the pill world. So, like, I could tell if she had a purse full of Xanax, or if it was pain pills or whatever, and I could pretty much on the dot guess how long it would be before things got really ugly, or before, like, things were going to spiral to the next level or whatever. I could hear it in her voice when she was still sober, but had already, like, gotten her prescription filled at the pharmacy. I just knew exactly what was going on with her, and vice versa. Like, when my family would be, like, really upset with me, say, for making a choice that seemed like it was going to lead me to the land of no return, dropping out of high school, or, you know, a situation with, like, my goddaughter, whatever, my mom would just say, like, you know, she would just go with it. And later in life, she said, I just knew. Like, I knew you were the kind of person that was way too curious. You had a thirst for knowledge. I knew you were going to get your education just in your own time and on your own terms. I knew that you would graduate with a degree. I knew that you would not get stuck in the stereotypical situation that everyone expected me to get stuck in. Like, I lived in this really, really bad area in a trailer park, and, like, you know, just was making choices that seemed very negative for myself and my future, but it was just a stepping stone. And she said to me, like I said, later in life, she said, I knew that it was just a very short season, and that you needed that. And I never felt like that would be your future. I just felt like that's where you were stopping along the way. You know, we had, like, very deep conversations about what her intuition as a parent was, what my intuition as her child was, like, and how and why those things always felt like truth, and those things were always correct. Like, they always came out in the wash as being fact. And you know, for me, I think that I needed that experience so badly, like the experience that I had with my mom, of being able to talk about things, that understanding each other's intuition about our relationship as parent and child. I think I needed that so badly because, you know, in the future, my mom would pass away unexpectedly before I even turned 30, and I would be literally devastated by the grief. It would change my life in many ways. It would change who I was as a person, and I wouldn't even have a sense of what to do with myself. through that experience, though, I have really looked at attachment on a deep level. Okay? I've looked at attachment, and I've looked at my relationship with this child that I raised myself, and that story goes very deep. Like, the bonds of that scenario and the reason that scenario even came to pass, like why I was in a position and ultimately decided to step up, and how I did that, like all of these things that I don't really feel like it's relevant to get into, but all of these things that would shock a lot of people, I would really start to understand them from a different perspective. My mom has said things to me over the years that didn't really resonate with me at the time, but they would start to resonate with me as I'm grieving her after we moved back home from, across the country, and after we decided to have my goddaughter move back in with us, and we're trying to move through some really difficult years in her life, and her dad is in the depths of his addiction for part of that, so he's homeless, on heroin, shooting up heroin without anywhere to go. He's literally stealing from anybody. He's MIA. She's a whole wreck trying to figure out where he is half the time, and then him getting sober during this and finding God, and it was just a whole journey that I had to experience a lot of these things. Her biological mom even changing her life around, which was the most shocking. And even though they don't have a relationship, me having to come to terms with that and talking to my God, literally understanding these genetic, biological pulls that are these magnets, this magnetic force that even if it's not something my kid was dealing with right then, she would deal with it. And I mean, we would go through these scenarios with her dad, for example. I mean, I had to really defend his truth, even though I was upset with him, even though her truth had to be protected as well. But I had to constantly fight his battles for him, even though he didn't know I was fighting them. He didn't know that I was trying to get her to a rational place and understanding the truth of his addiction and their lack of a bond, their lack of attachment. Yes, they have this thing from, the early years, but he doesn't know you and you don't really know him, and he's not this ideal father that you have made up in your mind. That person isn't real, just you don't want to be this ideal version of yourself that we expect of you. You don't think it's fair that I expect you to make straight A's and that you have extracurricular activities and that you're, doing your chores without being asked, and you think that all of these things are this perfect version of yourself, that I should never expect all of these things from one person, but yet you do the same thing from your biological father. You expect him to be someone and to behave in ways that are just unrealistic, and then you let yourself get disappointed and you get your feelings hurt over something that was never ever going to happen, because you want something that is not something that person is even capable of giving you. And so why are we not looking at the reality of our life? Why are we not looking at the reality of our situation and our dad, and being fair with ourselves and with our parents? Did we deserve to have better than this? We all deserve to have better than this. We all deserved better. I deserved a better chance at my own youth, sans all of this, right? Just being a godparent, quote unquote, in the sense of my friends have a kid and I love that kid, and that kid grows up in a normal-ish environment, and I get to be an aunt-ish kind of person, I deserved that. I was 16 when this all happened. I had no say in you being conceived or born or abandoned or any of that, right? She definitely had no say in being here and having this life. She didn't ask for this.